I am the famous American, and yes, I live in the United States where, despite slavery and things like that happening a long time ago, way before we were born, we are seeing that tension afterwards. I was born in 1981, I'm about to turn 40, and even when I was born, it still was before even the world that I grew up in, even in Alabama where I grew up, I didn't really see racial tension there. But collectively, all these years later, now we're seeing more of that. And I think because of that, what we see, we're in a situation where a white man, which I think most people perceive me as a white man, even though a quarter of my genealogy and ethnicity would go back to Mexico 100 years ago, people still perceive me as a white man. As a white man, there's really no real insult that you can call someone in my situation, a white man. There's no curse word, there's no slur you can use that will truly offend a white man. People have tried, but there just isn't. Why is that? That's what this video is about. Well, ultimately, when you're the least repressed demographic here in the United States, there's no way to really insult that. The closest you can come to that is implying that that person is a racist and implying that that person is not, quote, checking their privilege. So it's interesting because there is no word that you could call a white man to offend him except for maybe racist, but even then, that would have to be backed up by his actions. And it'd be one thing if the guy has a Confederate flag waving around, but just because someone is a white man does not mean that they're automatically racist. In fact, I think what I perceive as a white man is that I'm overly aware of that concept, and I want to make sure that I am not minimizing minorities, instead embracing them. To me, that's just common knowledge. That's being a decent human being. But I do think it's interesting. There is no way to insult a white man with some word. I mean, when we think about the N-word, we think of the most toxic, offensive word really that exists here in the culture of the United States. I mean, there are curse words, there's profanity, which they'll change the movie rating to an R for, but that's still not offensive on any kind of same level as the N-word would be. And it's not just for Black Americans, it's for other races as well. But that's the most offensive word here in the United States, specifically. So it's interesting that there's not a counterpart to that for white men, specifically. There's no word to offend, because when you are the least repressed demographic, how can there be, except for to imply that that person is a racist? And even then, you have to look at that person's history to even find out if they are even racist. And even then it gets dicey, because even when we look back at old Disney movies, or even shows like Friends, they have certain things that aren't quite acceptable now. So if you go back far enough in anyone's past, whether it's a human being or whether it's a TV show or a movie, you're going to find things that are not acceptable, and they would be deemed racist now by today's standards. So how do you know if someone's racist? I guess you have to look at how they're actually treating minorities and speaking about minorities and what their actions are. But see, it still goes back to the concept. You can't just hurl the word racist at a white man and expect it to stick, because it doesn't have the same power as, say, the N-word does. I think this is interesting and fascinating. I think it's interesting when there's not a perfect balance of things, and we have to figure that out. So let's explore it further. Your opinion matters right here in the comment section.